We continue with highlights of Foundations for Freedom with Greg Pinio.
We're going to go through several case studies, actual deals that I have done. And I've picked 6 case studies that underline the principles that we've been trying to talk about. And I'm going to use a very similar format in discussing all of these case studies so that you can sort of follow along and have it be roughly at least in the same grid as the last one. The first case study I'd like to go through is a house that I've purchased. It's been about a year ago now on the plateau of Queen Anne Hill. Queen Anne is a highly desirable location within 5 minutes to downtown Seattle, just a bit to the north of the city, and it's just a very, very solid investment area. This particular property, I canvassed that entire hill for single-family homes that meet a certain tax-assessed value. I don't send out letters or solicit every home on the hill. I'm not interested in buying $1 million houses and fixing them up and trying to sell them for $1.4 million. I'm looking to purchase homes to fix up and sell that are on the lower end, exactly the lower third of everything that is selling in that desirable location. In other words, I want to be a dealer of Toyotas, not Rolls-Royces. I want there to be a market for my finished product. And I want there to be the biggest market share of all people that could buy this house if they liked it at the end of the day. So I solicited this house by virtue of a letter. And as it turns out, the owner of this home passed away. And this home was inherited by his 2 nieces. The nieces went over to the home to sort of do like you do, I guess, when you inherit a home. You kind of go over and see what the heck you've got. And in their process of sort of cleaning the home up and kind of looking at what they had to work with, what did they do? Well, they ran across a letter that I sent the owner who passed away, simply stating that I was a real estate investor, that I would be happy to make him an offer to purchase his property. Should he have a desire to sell, please give me a call. Well, they found that letter and they called me, and I talked with them over the phone and determined that they indeed were serious sellers, that they had no desire to own this property or really do much with it at all. They just wanted to sell it. They were successful women. They were in their mid-50s. They were married to successful men. They lived on the east side in real nice homes. This fixer-upper house was not something they were interested in at all, other than the fact that they inherited it, so they would like to sell it. The home is full of all of the owner who passed away, all of his belongings. And none of those belongings did they have any interest in at all. To list the property with a real estate company would have required effort on their part, because it would have required that they get rid of all this stuff in the house and at least do some basic cleaning and some basic preparing the home for market. All of that they didn't want to do either. They sort of didn't really want to do anything. And so I came out, I looked at the home. It was a very, very solid home structurally. It had recently had a new panel box put in, so the electrical had been updated. The roof was in good condition. It had a solid foundation on it. It had not been messed with in terms of what I call a Home Depot remodel, where people try to actually improve things and they actually make them worse. This was an original condition, 1909 construction on Queen Anne. Some of the plumbing had been updated, but not all of it. 2-bedroom, 1-bath, bungalow, large living room, large kitchen, and then downstairs is a completely unfinished basement. About 1,000 feet up and 1,000 feet of unfinished down. It had a 1-car detached garage that was in pretty bad shape, no garage door, kind of leaning, and definitely in need of some effort. The yard had sort of been let go, and yet on one side of the house to the south, the neighbor to the south, that house was worth approximately $800,000 or $900,000. The house to the north, probably $600,000 or $700,000. And it's on a very, very nice, quiet street in a perfect location. So I was willing to offer them $270,000 all cash, close whenever they want to close for the home. And of course, I based that evaluation based on the buy and flip formula that I gave you on the previous CD. In other words, I felt that I could fix this home up, pay for my costs to buy it, pay for my rehab costs, and I felt that there was a 30% of my acquisition price profit margin in buying it up, getting it ready, reselling it, and making 30% over and above what I paid for it. So if I paid $270,000, I felt there was at least $75,000 or $80,000 of profit in this house in a short term. And so I made them an offer. I tried to probe what they wanted for the home. They had discussed with a real estate person. The real estate person said that if they would prepare it for listing without doing any further work, he felt that they could put it on the market for $320,000 or $330,000 as is, just by getting rid of this stuff, and that from there he felt fairly confident they would get an offer. Well, what does that mean? They were savvy enough to know that, first of all, they didn't want to get it ready for market, because that took effort. Second of all, getting an offer doesn't mean you're going to get what you're asking for it. Thirdly, would they get a list of work orders? Would they actually have to perform some work before closing? They weren't interested in that. And fourthly, they'd be paying this agent 6 or 7%, which is $20-some thousand for listing the property. So when they told me that number, I could kind of work it backwards and then sort of appeal to the idea that I am an investor and I expect to make a profit, and my comfort zone in knowing I can make a profit would be to pay you, the high end that I could pay you is $270,000. And they were very fine with that. Matter of fact, they said, that's great. So what do we do from here? And I said, well, why don't we drive up the street? I'll buy you lunch. I have the forms in the car. We'll fill out the forms and we'll close in about a week. All I need is clear title saying you are the rightful owners, and that obviously that the property is, you're getting all cash. So it's going to be cashed out at closing. Even if there is something owed on it, it's going to be cashed out just so it's under $270,000. And they were fine with that. They owned it free and clear, no problem, and off we went. Part of what made this additionally easy to negotiate is that although the property was willed to these two nieces, they were willed this property with instructions to distribute the proceeds of this home equally among 13 different people. Grandchildren, nieces, nephews, cousins, who knows who. So although they were technically given it completely, it was their responsibility at the end of it all to distribute the proceeds equally among 13 people. Why do I mention that? Well, here I'm negotiating a purchase price with two persons. Okay, let's just do the math. If I offer them $270,000 versus $296,000, $26,000 more, all it really means to them is not $26,000. it means $2,000. They are 1/13th recipient of the net proceeds. So are you following what I'm saying here? In other words, my $270 versus $296 is only a $2,000 difference to them. There's a principle here that you need to understand. In estate situations, when there's a lot of people getting a small piece of the pie, there's usually room to negotiate a very favorable price because it does not impact their own personal situation nearly as much as a person who is the sole only owner. Negotiating that $26,000 difference would be a much bigger jump if it meant $26,000 out of one person's pocket. In this situation, it just meant two. So understanding their role and how many people were involved allowed me to feel pretty comfortable that I could get this down to where it met my own investment criterion. So we agreed on $270. I bought the house. Now, how did I buy the house? It's all cash to the seller. Well, after many, many years of doing this, I have a relationship with my banker that I simply tell them when I find a buy and flip that meets my investment criterion, and they say fine. And they will give me a 6-month loan on any buy and flip I ever ask for, 100% of the money I need to not only buy it, but fix it up. Okay? So I went to the bank and I asked for $280,000. They collected 1 point of fees to do that. Okay? I paid some closing costs. And essentially that closed the transaction, cashed them out, and left me $6,000 or $7,000 to fix up the house, of which I spent that $6,000 or $7,000 in 30 days. My crew was on that every day for 30 days. And basically it was a lot of labor. We painted the outside of the house. We painted the inside of the house. We put on a garage door, stood the garage up straight, re-nailed the siding, prepped it, painted the siding on the garage. We took everything out of the house and hauled it away. Most of it was just garbage. We completely cleaned up the yard, added a whole bunch of flowers and plants, topsoil, made the yard look beautiful. And 30 days after I bought it, it was on the market, and we listed it for $389,000, and it sold for $380,000. And it sold the first 2 weeks it was on the market. Out of that whole mess, when you pay closing costs and rehab, the whole 9 yards, I walked out of that transaction 60 days after I bought it with a little bit more than $80,000 net. Now, that's nothing to write home about. That certainly isn't the best buy and flip I've ever done. It's what I would call a minimum criterion buy and flip. If I paid $270, you can do the math. My criterion, of course, is a 30% margin. That's the margin so that if everything goes wrong, well, I made just that 30% and just a little bit more. I wanted to put it on the market and get it sold. I probably could have listed it for more. I might have even been able to sell it for more. But the longer you're exposed, the more possible problems can happen. That's why it's really important on the buy and flip that you are in, do your thing, and you're out within 90 days. That's the criterion. Now, all by itself, that tells you that we're not lifting up houses and putting foundations under them, and we're not adding second stories, and we're not doing all these very complicated construction things that require permits. No, because we're not going to get in and out of that in 90 days. The reason we're in and out in 90 days is because I can tell you today what the market is doing, where things are at. I can't tell you a year from now where things are at. So if I'm buying something and doing my thing and hoping to sell it, well, I've got holding costs and I've got an unknown. I'm wanting to shorten the time frame as much as possible to get closer to today's known. That's why I'm doing that. So I'm looking for properties who are structurally sound, who have no major issues. Now, that's to say that, have I put in panel boxes and put on new roofs and this and that? Sure, of course. But those are things that can be done quickly and with minimal permit issues. When you start doing major renovations or additions or those sorts of things, just getting your permit is going to take you longer than 3 months. Okay? So there you go. There's a buy and flip. It's pretty straightforward. And the tools that were employed in this particular transaction, I think to start it off were, how did I find the property? So if I were to affectionately call it a bird letter, that's what scared up this possibility. It's just a very simply written letter. Okay? Another tool that was used is a working line of credit with my lender. I need to have that working line of credit. You need to have that working line of credit. And to sort of recap our first CD, you need 3 different lenders. You need your 1 to 4 unit lender that does stuff just like this. You need your 5 and up unit lender, portfolio lender that's going to be involved in larger projects for you. You need your private banker who will give you unsecured lines of credit. And you need to have relationships with all of those people so that when a bird flies and you need to shoot, the relationship's already established. They know who you are. They've got all your current information. I send every banker I have my current up-to-date information every quarter. And the minute tax returns are done, don't make them have to ask you for your tax returns. Just send them to them. They need all that information. Every quarter I'll send them updated financial statements, updated tenant lists, so that when the bird flies, the team is ready. The team is ready. We're not having to learn each other's names. That's why I can close so quickly. So those are the major tools. A very simple buy and flip. In this scenario, the only thing we subbed out in this entire scenario is the people who did the garage doors. So my own crew did all of the labor and all of the painting and all of the cleanup on this. Now, if you don't have a crew, that would certainly be a part of this equation that you would need to put together. And yet in this scenario, anybody that is a decent laborer could have done every bit of the work that was needed on this house. So it wasn't very complicated. The first thing that you will do, and it's almost a given, is that when someone calls on one of your solicitations, your next phone call is to the title company to get the full property profile on this property. The title company will also provide you sold comps of like-kind property in that 3-block radius, so that if you haven't been doing your due diligence and you're not perfectly up to speed on what is sold right in that area, they will give you that list as well. On that property profile, you're going to have the tax assessed value of this property, the current tax assessed value. Understand that some property profiles will show you the tax assessed value based on a senior discount. And in this case, the gentleman who passed away, the property showed him as the current owner, but it was obvious to me that he had applied for and been granted a senior discount. And so I think the tax assessed value on this property was under $200,000. When in reality, the market value of that property in the as-is condition was $320,000 to $330,000 as is. As is. It would have sold, interesting that there's 2 types of listing agents out there. The real estate people who came in and said that, well, if everything goes right and you clean this out, we'll get an offer. We think we can get an offer for $320,000. Well, when you get to know which agents are giving advice in a certain area, you know that there are those who price things to sell that minute and actually oftentimes run the price up because they have so much activity. And that's actually I think, a real solid way to list properties. It doesn't do the seller any service for an agent to list the property way above its market value and have it sit there, because then it's old news. To get people back out to it when you finally come to your senses and want to lower the price, that's like pulling teeth. Well, this particular agent that gave him the advice that he felt it could procure an offer for $320, there's no question that that price would have been run up to $330, $335 in its as-is stage. So I knew that because I knew the market going in. I also knew that after I did some very, very simple things, I felt that there was the ability to sell this in the $380 to $390 range instantly if certain things were done. First-time buyers, which certainly is the market for this price range of home, are very influenced by the aesthetic appearance. Very, very few first-time buyers can look beyond a laundry list of needs that a property has. I'll give you an example of that I think is just hysterical. About a year and a half ago, I sold a 12-unit condominium that I owned. So we sold 12 units, and we cleaned every single unit up into its like-new condition. But the agent that listed this property talked me into setting up a model unit. And I just drug my feet. I didn't want to spend the money to buy furniture and all this foo-foo crate and barrel stuff. I thought it was ridiculous. These were priced so well and they looked so nice and clean. Surely buyers can picture what furniture in these things looks like. This agent was adamant that I needed to just cough up $10,000 so they could buy some foo-foo little drapes, a few pieces of furniture, a few pictures for the walls. She wanted me to paint one accent wall in the living room, kind of the latest faux cool color, and one accent wall in the bathroom. And I'm like, I'm so tired of this project. We've worked on it for 6 months to get it ready. I'm tired of painting. It's going to sell. No way. She wouldn't budge. I finally gave in. Here's your $10,000. You do it. And she did. She painted her 2 little walls. She got an interior designer to pick out just the right kind of furniture and the right kinds of little stands, the right kinds of little lamps and the little Starbucks canisters on the countertop and the little towels for the bathroom and all this foo stuff, and set up a model unit. And then she put the model unit in what I would have considered the worst unit in the entire project. And I thought, how silly is that? If we're going to try to show something off, let's at least put it in the best unit. Well, I've been at this 30 years, and this just shows that I didn't know what this was all about. Guess how many times in a 12-unit project we moved the model unit? Well, the most you could possibly move it is 11 times, right? And that's how many times we moved it. The model unit sold the first day it was on the market. Well, of course, they don't get all the stuff. And so I get a call saying the model unit sold. You need to move it to another unit. Paint the same 2 walls, the same color. I went, oh, brother. Okay, so I take my crew. We could move this model unit, including painting the 2 walls, in 4 hours. 2 guys, pick up everything, put it in the next unit in exactly the same place, hang the picture on exactly the same wall, paint the 2 exact walls, put the canisters on the same countertop, and within a week, guess what happens? That model unit sells. Pick it up, put it to the next worst unit. I'm a quick study. Don't put it in a good unit. Put it in a crappy unit that you want to sell. Model unit sells. Pick it up, move it again. Pick it up, move it again. Finally, the last person to buy, I made him a deal to buy all the stuff with it because there's nowhere to move it. We've sold them all. And I don't want all this foo-foo crap. And they loved it. Oh, this is why I bought the unit. It's not the unit. It's the foo-foo crap. Unbelievable. Well, I've since thought a lot about this, and it has reinforced Picaro, way back when, underlined two principles. He called them the primacy effect and the recency effect. The first thing you see, you will remember. The last thing you see, you will remember. Likely you'll forget a lot in between. Well, all of a sudden that $12 doormat with the sprig of flowers on the front porch, and the first thing when you see when you walk in is some beautiful little piece of furniture on a faux finished little wall. Bam! Fish on. The hook is set. Keep the tip up. You got 'em. Well, it was never underlined so much for me as that little 12-unit project and that silly model home that we moved 11 times. In this particular scenario of this house that we bought to sell on Queen Anne, I knew that if we could paint the outside in a little two-tone paint the inside, set a few little foo-foo model finishes up, who is our buyer? A very influenced first-time buyer that walks in and goes, oh my God, honey, just has to have it. Period. End of story. So the world of marketing became real to me, and now forevermore, not that I don't think everything I've ever done I've tried to make look nice, but it's so important that it is just perfect. Don't think about putting it on the market until it is done, and I mean done. And you'll get great results. The second case study I'd like to talk about is kind of an unusual situation. It was a referral to me of an informant on the street that said that he knew of somebody who wanted to sell their home and that it was on Queen Anne. That's about all they knew. And I called this particular owner, said that I was asked to give them a call by so-and-so, and were they considering selling? Yes, they are, and they'd like to talk with me. So I met with her. This lady was in her early 60s. About 4 years prior, had lost her husband of many years, and was in a mode of just, I think, feeling a little bit overwhelmed by life's realities, and the taxes and the insurance of the house had gone up considerably in the year or two prior to her calling me. I think she was just wanting to get a lot of things wrapped up while she was in good health, while she knew what she was doing, and have some help on her financial situation. The interesting part of this transaction, though, is that she had no desire to move. And so a little bit different of a scenario. Her motivation for wanting to sell did not involve moving. It involved a sense of security that her affairs were wrapped up, that raising taxes and insurance were not going to affect her, and that if any major repairs needed being done on the house, that wasn't going to bankrupt her, that no longer would be her responsibility. Those were her concerns. She had a brother who was younger than she was, who was a CPA, and a very close friend who is an attorney. And I met with all of them for countless meetings to construct a very simple transaction. At the time that I bought this place in the mid-90s, the tax-assessed value of this house on the south slope of Queen Anne was $250,000. Based on that value and just sort of what they felt other homes were selling for in the area, it was worth it to them, given certain considerations, that they would sell the house for $220,000 if I was willing to work with them on the more important parts of why they were selling. And so very simply put, what we constructed was this. We wrote up a purchase price for $215,000. I don't know why it came down off of their number slightly, but it did. I gave them $15,000 down, and $200,000 in the form of a promissory note. What's interesting about this is that the note is frozen. It doesn't accrue any interest. It has no interest associated with it, nor does the seller, who still lives there, pay any rent. So I have no payment due the beneficiary, the seller, and nor does the occupant, who was the seller, pay me any rent. And it sits just like that until such time as she gives me a 90-day notice of her intent to move. At that point, on the 90th day, I have a $50,000 balloon payment due her, which now reduces the principal owing from $200 to $150. The balance of $150 will have a 7% interest rate associated with it, a 30-year amortization for payment purposes, and a 10-year cash out from that point on. Named as additional beneficiaries on the note are 14 grandchildren. So, her idea is that I'm going to sell my house to you. Now I'm out from under the obligation of paying taxes and insurance. If there are any major repairs that need being done, it's not her responsibility to do them. It's my responsibility to do them. And we just hold the line. And at some point in the future, with no definitive time given, she will give me a 90-day notice of her intent to move. And at that point, the balance of the terms kick in. Now, what was my thinking on this? I mean, her thinking was this is a good thing for her. She's going to wrap up her affairs. She's got enough down to pay a few bills off and pay her closing costs. She no longer has to pay taxes and insurance. She no longer has to worry about major repairs. Great deal for her. On my side of the equation, I felt that the market value of the home at the time I bought it was somewhere around $300,000. But I also felt that it was in prime time location and was only going to appreciate greatly over the next decade, if not beyond that. And so I looked at what I felt were minimum appreciation numbers that this house should experience per year. And I felt that it should appreciate a minimum of 5% a year. Well, 5% of $300,000 day one is $15,000. My taxes and insurance and any projected maintenance that I would need to do on the property, I didn't feel would come to near that at the time. And so I felt like it was kind of a no-brainer. And I would pay the $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 a year, whatever the taxes and insurance were. And if there was any repairs I needed to do, I'd send my crew over to do them. She maintains the landscaping. She keeps the house clean. My role is just repairs. And we would take it down the road. That was 1996. I believe, late 95, actually, September of 95. And I can tell you that my 2004 tax-assessed value on that house, that's the tax-assessed value, for 2004, I just got it in the mail, is $801,000. And so if you figure I've paid $5,000 or $6,000 a year for 8 years, I paid $215,000 for the house, I've paid, let's just say, $6,000 a year for 8 years, another $48,000, $50,000. I've got $265,000 into it, but really all I've got into it is $65,000 cash, and the value, let's just say it's at tax assessed value, $801,000. That was a good decision on my part. Okay, so a little bit of an interesting scenario. Better than an option at the time in my version, because it solved her problem. If I gave her an option, it wouldn't solve her anxiety about paying taxes and insurance. It wouldn't have given her any security about repairs and maintenance issues that came up over time. An option doesn't do that. I don't own the property when I give you option consideration. I only bought a right to buy the property in the future. And I can tell you this, that if I optioned it in 1996, there's no way I would have given her an 8-year window option to buy it at $801,000, right? So, this was the tool that worked for that particular time. The answer is she's still there and still healthy and all still well. And I hope she stays there another 10 years because it's kind of a simple situation from my ownership perspective. There's very little I ever do there. I mean, I don't even mow the lawn. I pay the taxes and insurance. That's pretty much what I do. Over the last 8 years, I've rebuilt a little front porch, which took a half a day. And to be honest, I think that's about it. So there haven't been any major maintenance issues. So that's another little tool. Keep that one in mind. The next case study I'd like to go through is a call that I got from a gruff old guy who got a letter from me saying that I was interested in buying his building. This was the world's ugliest, crappiest looking duplex in Ballard that you've ever seen. It was in a so-so area of Ballard. I'm not going to tell you it was a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10 in location, but it was a good, solid area, but not near like a plateau of Queen Anne or an East Lake or something like that. So, you take everything into account, and this was just an okay, solid area in Ballard. The duplex itself, the guy had owned for a long, long time, and I would say for about the last 15 years, the tenants were the ones in control of this building. It had gotten so bad that the tenants who were currently living in this duplex had been there about 10 or 11 years each and literally had the owner of the duplex so intimidated that he wouldn't even try to collect rent. One of the tenants was a guy who was a self-proclaimed attorney for a local Indian tribe. Now, if you were to check the bar, which I did, he actually wasn't an attorney, but I guess he was a good enough attorney for the local Indian tribe. They thought he was an attorney. So that's what his, quote, job was. However, he never left his place, so he must have worked out of his home. I don't know. The other guy next door, for all intents, did nothing. Retired, whatever you want to call it. He sat in his living room and smoked cigarettes all day and watched TV. And that's all he had done for about 10 or 11 years. To say this thing looked rough from the outside would be such an understatement, I can't even tell you. Dead cars, dead appliances, just the most... It was a junkyard, is what it was. It's just an absolute junkyard. And yet, across the street were brand new condominiums. On one side, a immaculately maintained single-family home, owner-occupied by a lady that had been there forever. And on the other side, another immaculate single-family home that was a rental home. It was occupied by tenants, but was just cared for meticulously by the owner. And there, sitting in the middle of these two beautiful homes, across the street from beautiful new condominiums, is this absolute dump site. Well, I met the seller, who would not meet at his home, which is always my preference. I met him at Denny's. And we talked about this transaction. I went by the property when I got a call from him to refamiliarize myself with it. I got a property profile on it. And when I went by, I just kind of on the outside of the property, walking around sort of the outside, the neighbor who lived to the east, the lady who was really old. Actually, she was in her early 90s, but she looked like she was like in her mid 70s. Very spry, very articulate. she saw me standing there and came out on her front porch and inquired, like, who are you? What are you doing? And I said, well, my name's Greg, and I'm looking into buying this property. And she started laughing, and she very, very, she was a very to the point old lady, and had some nice adjectives thrown in with her language skills. But bottom line, she said that there's no way that the current owner will sell that property. And then secondly, even if I did buy it, what am I going to do with these tenants? I said, well, I have a feeling that I would probably raise the rent and they wouldn't be able to afford the new rent, so probably they would move. And she absolutely declared that there's no way I would ever get those tenants out of there. There's no way. They're expert bums. They know every loophole. The one is a self-proclaimed attorney. There's no way I would get them out. Well, it was nice to hear her take on this, and also her take on the fact that these tenants haven't paid rent in who knows how long, and that they have threatened the seller that if he even tries to collect rents, that they would turn this house in to the city authorities and get it condemned, which may or may not have been true, but that's the intimidation factor. Well, I knew all of that information before I went to meet with the seller. And so, although the seller was trying to play that what he had here was real valuable and that here was the rent roll, see, I actually knew different. The point I'm making is that sometimes 5 minutes talking to a neighbor is worth 50 hours of research that you could get out of books and public records. So, learn something there. Take some time to talk to the neighbors if you're considering buying a property. And they'll tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly. Most of it in this case was bad and ugly. Actually, another category was uglier. That's what this one was. Anyway, I felt that this property, this was not a property, or I should say it wasn't a location that I wanted to keep long term. It was a property that I wanted to sell. And yet, I felt that this was in such disrepair that, to be honest, I didn't want to put it in front of my lender. I think they would have thought I'd lost my mind. I wrote up a deal for this property for $175,000, $5,000 down, $170,000 on a promissory note at 6% interest with a 3-year cash out. On or before 3 years, I could cash him out. He was adamant that he wanted all of his cash right now. But there was no way I was going to give him all of his cash right now. I needed to reserve capital to fix this thing up. I knew I was going to fix it up and sell it, and he could get cashed out on the sale. And different negotiations they're all different. But in this situation, I sort of let him know subtly that I knew the kind of tenants he had. I had chatted briefly with the neighbor who filled me in on some of the history there. And basically, I sort of grabbed a few cards out of his hand and put them on the table. And from there, all of a sudden, he was pretty agreeable to take $5,000 down, and it's better than getting nothing. I mean, what he's got coming in right now is nothing. And he's got tenants who are totally in control. And this is a better possibility for him. Even if I don't pay, that's what does he have to lose? That's what he's getting right now. And I told him, here's what my game plan is. I'm going to go in and I'm going to whip this thing into shape. And they won't be here in 30 days. And I'm going to take it from there, and I'm going to get this thing turned around, and I'm going to get it looking like it should look. Well, we wrote up the deal. It closed in 2 days. And, the other part of this equation I negotiated is that I had no payments due for 90 days. My first payment wasn't due for 90 days. Because obviously my intent was to kick these tenants out, and I had no income stream coming in to make my payments. So I negotiated that into the transaction. So I closed it, subject to a walkthrough of the property and an inspection. I wanted to crawl under the property. I wanted to look at the structure. What I could tell from the outside was that it just needed a whole bunch of cosmetic work. I wanted to be sure of that because there's only one thing for sure about a project like this. It's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse. And so I made it subject to an inspection. He met me out there a couple days after we initially wrote up the deal, gave his tenants notice that we're coming in to inspect. Neither of the tenants were there when I walked through. I have only seen something this gross just a couple times in all the years I've been at this. And yet, structurally, it was solid. Roof was solid, frame was solid, had panel boxes, plumbing, although it needed replacing, was easily accessible. Basically, it was just one heck of a big cleanup project. So I closed it. The next step, obviously, is what do I do with these tenants? Well, I write them a letter saying that theoretically, your current rent amount is $300 each a month. I say theoretically because I'm also aware that you haven't paid rent in a long time. Well, non-theoretically, your new rent as of 30 days from now, if you choose to stay, is $1,100 a month. I will need month's rent, I will need last month's rent on deposit, and I will need a security deposit. Now, what am I doing here? Am I expecting them to stay and pay rent? Of course not. What I'm wanting them to do is acknowledge that the guard has just changed. So day one, I issue that notice. I also put in my letter that work will begin immediately on the outside of this structure and will go on 7 days a week from 6 o'clock in the morning till 7 or 8 o'clock at night. 7 days a week. And that will begin immediately. Okay, well, for bums who like to, be out all night and sleep in till 10 or 11, we made it a point of having very loud equipment there, started and running at 6 o'clock in the morning. Pressure washers, jackhammers, whatever it takes, right? I mean, I'd leave my diesel truck running in the front yard just because it's loud. I rented a Bobcat and started tearing up the whole backyard. Loud stuff, right? We had to repair some siding on the outside. We're pounding on the siding at 6 o'clock in the morning. Well, within a couple days, they got the idea that, the one guy came out one time and said, "Hey, what are you doing here? This is ridiculous. We got to sleep. We have tenants' rights." I said, "Call the police. Call them. Just call them. I know the work hours in the city of Seattle. I'm doing everything within my right. Call them. You got to understand, I own this property. You don't. Period. And by the way, if you want to move, feel free." So I kind of let that go on for 2 or 3 days. Then I sat him down when I found him there and said, "Listen, I'd like to know your intentions. Are you going to stay and pay the rent, or are you going to be moving?" I don't know yet." "Well, let me throw something your way. Both of you. I'm willing to pay you if you'll get out of here immediately. So think on that. That's an option too." Well, when you put money, wave it in front of somebody that has none, and they realize their days are numbered anyway, because there's only so much you can do, and pretty soon the sheriff's going to put you on the street, right? If they don't pay rent when it's due the next month, I'm going to issue a 3-day pay or quit. I'm going to get an unlawful detainer, and now the eviction process has started. So they're 45 days away from being out anyway. And now I'm waving cash in front of them to say, if you're willing to leave, we'll talk. Well, both of them within that week, with my little construction project going on, came and said, "Well, so how much are you going to pay me if I'm out by the end of the week?" I said, "Well, how much do you need to get out by the end of the week?" Started at $1,000, and I just totally started cracking up, laughing. "There's no way I'm paying you $1,000. You're going to be out in 45 days anyway. Why would I pay you $1,000? Do I care that you're not sleeping in? I could care less." Bottom line is, within the next couple days, I gave them a couple $100 each, and they left. And I immediately didn't just change the locks. I took off the entire front doors and threw them away, and the back doors. So leave it open. It needs to air out anyway, right? So they're not coming back. Started immediately going on the inside. The bottom line is, between the day I bought it, 30 days later, it was done. both units, completely done. Inside, outside, yard, garage rebuilt, roof on the garage, fences, painted on the outside, painted on the inside, sand down the hardwood floors on the inside of these units, kitchen countertops, new vinyl in the kitchen, new appliance package. I spent about $15,000 cash, and Rich and I, one of my employees and I, did all the work ourselves. And 30 days from there, I ran an ad. I rented both sides for $1,000 a month. They're big one-bedroom units with washers and dryers in the units. Rented both sides. The minute they were rented, I put the for sale sign up, and it was sold immediately. Ran an ad. Didn't have to use a broker. Ran an ad by myself. Sold it for $275. Again, nothing to write home about. You know, my net out of that deal was about $75,000 or $80,000, but it was a quick turn. I was out of that 60 days after I owned it. The interesting part is that along the way, I became the hero of the block. That's really the bigger play here, is that I still keep in touch with both neighbors on both sides, with several people on the block that were so appreciative of the dead van, the dead school bus, this was just a dump. Now looks like a really, really nice little side-by-side single-story duplex. Okay, now here's where the next part of the equation comes in. The guy who I bought it from, of course, wanted all of his cash immediately. But what I was able to talk him into was a 3-year note. He doesn't really follow what I'm doing with this property, doesn't really care. But I call him 30 days after the deal closes, and now I've got this thing done. I haven't put it on the market yet, but it's ready to go. I'm just going to rent it and put it on the market. And I call him, and I said, I owe you $170,000. And it's due in 3 years. If I were to pay you off in the next 60 days instead of over 3 years, what would you take? And he agreed that if I paid him off in the next 60 days, he'd take $150,000 instead of $170,000. Well, I put it on the market. It's sold. Escrow, of course, needs to pay off the underlying. I simply give him a copy of our negotiation that says if he's paid off within this time frame, he'll accept $150,000 cash. So that was a $20,000 phone call. I underline that point because what is the worst that can happen in that scenario? The worst that can happen in that scenario is that I'm going to get my $170,000 over 3 years, and no, I won't accept a dime less. Oh, okay, well, I just thought I'd ask. I thought you might need it sooner. Just thinking of you, right? But what actually happened is that, okay, if I had it in the next 60 days, I'd take $150,000 and I'd sign a full reconveyance and I'd be completely cashed out. That little question of proposition got teed up by involving the seller in the financing. I'm not going to call a bank who I have a 3-year note with and say, oh, bank, if I cash you out here, in the next 60 days, would you take $150,000? They'd go, what? No. As a matter of fact, now that you brought it up, let's check and see if our note has prepayment penalties on it. Maybe we're going to charge you more, So what teed up that opportunity, that last little $20,000 opportunity, was involving the seller in the financing. That opportunity would not be possible had I gone and gotten a bank loan to buy that building. Now, would I have bought that building if he was absolutely adamant, $175, all cash, period, drop dead, that's it? Yeah, I would have. But you see how much better it got by involving the seller? So there we go. There's our little Ballard buy and flip duplex. The tools that were used, pretty obvious. 1, a bird letter. Scared it up. Okay? 2, a minimal amount down. High use of leverage. 3, no payments for 90 days. In fact, I never made a payment. I was in and out of that before a payment ever came due. All right? 4, a discount for cash negotiations. Okay? If I cashed you out early, would you take less? I sold it by myself. I didn't have to hire brokers or agents. Consequently, on $275,000, I saved, a lot of money. I mean, do the math. 6 or 7% of that amount of money I saved by doing it myself, which really took nothing. Matter of fact, you know who bought it? A real estate broker and her husband, looking for a good investment for long term. So, pretty easy. And they, of course, paid all cash. Tools employed, obviously a lot of work, a thorough knowledge of landlord-tenant law needed on that particular transaction. I had 2 tenants that if I didn't play my cards just right, they'd still be there because they were experts. You'll find that landlord-tenant union is memory 1 on the auto dial of every tenant who is a bum and doesn't pay their rent. It's just they know, believe me, they know the landlord-tenant law forward, backward, left, and right. Go rent this movie, Pacific Heights. In that movie, who knew landlord-tenant law better? The incoming tenant or the green landlord? And see what happens to a green landlord. Classic real estate movie, Pacific Heights, Michael Keaton. It'll probably cure you from ever wanting to own real estate. But what it really should do is tell you that you need to know intimately the guidelines and laws that you have to follow as a landlord and what the tenant can and can't do. Okay? It'll take the intimidation out of it. This would be the perfect bird for the first-time investor that is looking to go in and just use a lot of sweat and a lot of hard work to create his first good situation. Now, this could have worked really well in a lot of situations. First of all, the price is a good price. The down payment, $5,000. So many investors' objectives or I should say objections are, where do I get started? How do I do it? I don't have a whole bunch of money. Well, you know what? If you can't get a hold of $5,000 somehow, some way to get going, you need to start right there. You're right. You're going to need a few bucks to get going, but this is about as minimal as you could hope to get in the door. About 90% of what I did from that moment forward was just hard work. Okay. Most of my expenses on this project were just labor, just hard work and paying labor. But imagine if this was your first bird and you were in there. If you made your payment, it was 6% interest on $170,000, right? So you've got a payment that is under what one of the units would rent for. So effectively, you're done with this bird. You could live in one side of this duplex, rent the other side, and the rental income for the other side would pay for the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance on the entire building. That's not a bad first start. Then if you lived in it for 2 years, you could sell it and by virtue of owner occupancy, move on to your next acquisition without a capital gains bill. So as an investor, this worked for me for a multitude of reasons. But this is the kind of bird that I'm hoping young investors run into because it has all of those possibilities. At the end of 2 years, you can keep it, move on, rent the other side, and go on to your next one. Keep it as a long-term hold. If there had been a substitution of collateral clause built into this, imagine what you could have done at that point. Now, in mine, there wasn't. I was just going to simply cash him out on or before 3 years. Again, think in terms of all the possibilities of how one simple acquisition done right creates a myriad of possibilities.
This is the end of Disc 4. Highlights continue on Disc 5.